The smell hit me first. Death and something else. Something animal and rotten that didn't belong. Sheriff Martinez stood at the edge of the wash, looking down at what used to be a person. "This is the sixth one," he said quietly. "You really think this is a serial killer, Agent Vega?" I looked at the torn flesh, the dirt disturbed by something that left tracks twice the size of any human foot. What else would it be? He just shook my head. "You should have stayed in Los Angeles." That was my introduction to thermal California on a Tuesday morning in late September 2023. The heat was already pushing 90 degrees by 8 a.m., and the desert air carried that dry, dusty smell that gets into everything. I'd driven out from the LA field office the night before, checked into the Desert Wind Motel on Highway 111, and met Sheriff Martinez at the Riverside County Sheriff's Station in Thermal at 7:30 sharp. "I'm Special Agent Ricardo Vega, Behavioral Analysis Unit, Federal Bureau of Investigation. 36 years old, 12 years with the Bureau, 7 in BAU. I've worked serial cases in Seattle, Phoenix, and San Diego. I've interviewed sociopaths, psychopaths, and everything in between. I've seen what human beings are capable of doing to each other when all the moral guardrails come off. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. The case file had landed on my desk 8 days earlier. 6 deaths over 4 months in and around thermal California, population just over 2,000, located in the Coachella Valley about 25 miles southeast of Palm Springs. The victims were all adults, aged 23 to 57, all found in remote desert locations within a 10-mile radius of town. All discovered within 24 to 48 hours of death. All showed signs of extreme violence, massive tissue trauma, partial consumption of soft tissue, limbs, severed or missing entirely. Local law enforcement had requested FBI assistance after the 4th victim. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department was understaffed and out of their depth. The case had all the hallmarks of a serial predator: geographic clustering, victim selection showing no obvious pattern beyond opportunity, escalating violence, and most tellingly, the perpetrator was consuming parts of the victims. Cannibalism almost always indicates severe psychological dysfunction. It's rare, even among serial offenders. It suggests someone deeply disconnected from normal human psychology, someone operating on pure predatory instinct mixed with psychosexual gratification or ritual significance. That's what I thought I was dealing with. Sheriff Martinez was a weathered man in his late 50s. Chicano. 2nd-generation thermal native. He wore his uniform pressed and his expression carefully neutral when he picked me up that first morning. "Appreciate you coming out, Agent Vega," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but somehow reluctant. "Though I'm not sure how much help we can give you. I'll need to see the crime scenes," I said. "All 6. I'll need witness statements, victimology workups, and access to your evidence logs. You'll have everything we've got," Martinez said, "which isn't much. Folks around here don't like talking to law enforcement much, and they're even less fond of federal agents. No offense. None taken," I said. "I'm used to it." That first crime scene was 3 miles east of town, down a dirt road that branched off Avenue 66, out past the last of the modest houses, and into pure desert scrubland. The body had been removed 2 weeks prior, but the site was still marked with evidence flags and crime scene tape that had faded in the Sunday. The victim had been a 32-year-old man named Joseph Alvarez, a mechanic from Mecca who'd been driving home from visiting his girlfriend in Thermal. His truck was found parked on the shoulder of the dirt road, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. His body was found 60 feet away in an arroyo, partially covered with sand and brush. Coroner said cause of death was exsanguination and massive trauma to the throat and chest. Martinez explained, standing at the edge of the wash. Some of the soft tissue was missing. Liver, kidneys, parts of the muscle tissue from the thighs and upper arms. I looked at the scene, at the disturbed earth, at the drag marks leading from the road down into the wash. And the tracks? And Martinez's jaw tightened. Yeah, the tracks. He led me down into the arroyo and pointed. There, in the dried mud, were impressions, footprints, if you wanted to call them that. They were elongated, almost 18 inches long, with 5 distinct toe impressions that showed what looked like claw marks extending beyond them. The stride length between prints was nearly 6 feet. No boots, I said. Barefoot. Yeah, Martinez said quietly. Could be someone very tall walking with a long stride, trying to confuse the scene, I offered. Serial offenders sometimes do that. Stage elements to mislead investigators. Martinez didn't respond. He just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We visited 3 more scenes that day. All similar. Victims found in remote areas, massive trauma, partial consumption. Those same impossible tracks. By the time we returned to the station in late afternoon, I had pages of notes and dozens of crime scene photos loaded onto my laptop. I need to start interviewing witnesses, I said. Anyone who saw the victims in the hours before they disappeared. Anyone who lives near the dump sites. Anyone who's seen anything unusual in the area over the past 4 months. Martinez rubbed his face. I can set that up. But Agent Vega, I'm telling you now, you're not going to get much cooperation. He wasn't kidding. Over the next 2 days, I conducted 17 interviews with thermal residents. 16 of them were exercises in professional stonewalling. People answered questions with flat, I don't know, responses, avoided eye contact, and volunteered absolutely nothing. A waitress at the Desert Star Cafe claimed she hadn't noticed anything unusual despite working the night shift during the entire timeline of the murders. A gas station attendant on Highway 111 said he never paid attention to customers, even though his station was one of only 3 in town. A ranch hand who lived a quarter mile from one of the dump sites insisted he'd never heard or seen anything out of the ordinary, despite the fact that the victim had been killed less than 1,000 feet from his property line. It was coordinated. It had to be. The level of uniform non-cooperation suggested either fear or collusion, and I was starting to think it was the former. On the 3rd day, I drove out to the Torres Martinez Desert Cahuilla Indian Reservation, which bordered the eastern edge of Thermal. 3 of the victims had been found within a mile of reservation land, and I wanted to speak with tribal authorities. The tribal police office was a low, sand-colored building off Martinez Road. The officer at the desk was a young woman with sharp eyes and zero interest in helping me. Tribal chairman isn't available, she said flatly, and we don't have any information about incidents off reservation land. 2 of the victims were tribal members, I said. Sandra Flores and Michael Norton. I need to understand their movements before they died, their associations, anything that might help identify a suspect. They were good people, the officer said. Didn't deserve what happened. But I can't help you. Can't. Or won't. Her expression hardened. Agent Vega, you seem like a reasonable person, so I'm going to be straight with you. There's nothing you can do about this. The best thing you can do is file your report and leave. I'm investigating 6 homicides, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm not leaving until I find who's responsible. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. Then I'm sorry for you. I left more frustrated than I'd been in years. This wasn't normal witness reluctance. This was something else entirely. That evening, I sat in my motel room reviewing the case files again. The Desert Wind Motel was a relic from the 1960s, a single-story strip of rooms facing the highway with a flickering neon sign and a vending machine that only dispensed Dr. Pepper. My room was number 114, at the far end away from the office. The air conditioning unit rattled like it was considering giving up entirely, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear trucks passing on Highway 111 50 feet away. I spread the crime scene photos across the bed and looked for patterns. Victimology showed no clear connection. Different ages, different occupations, different social circles. 3 men, 3 women, 2 tribal members, 4 non-tribal. What they had in common was opportunity. All were alone. All were in remote areas at night. All were near the reservation boundary. The medical examiner's reports were consistent across all 6 victims. Massive trauma from what appeared to be bites and clawing. The bite radius measurements didn't match human dentition. Too wide. Wrong tooth pattern. The ME had noted in her report that the wounds were consistent with a large predatory animal, possibly a mountain lion, though the consumption pattern is atypical. But mountain lions don't leave 18-inch human-shaped footprints. I was missing something. There was a piece of this that I wasn't seeing, and everyone in Thermal knew what it was except me. Around 9 p.m., someone knocked on my motel room door. I looked through the peephole and saw an elderly woman, Native American, maybe 70 years old, wearing a purple cardigan despite the heat. I opened the door with the chain still engaged. "Agent Vega?" she said. "My name is Agnes Norton. I need to talk to you." I recognized the last name. "You're related to Michael Norton, one of the victims?" "My grandson," she said. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "Please, 5 minutes." I let her in. She sat in the chair by the window and folded her hands in her lap. "You need to leave," she said simply. "Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest, Mrs. Norton. I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't just leave. I'm here to find who killed your grandson and 5 other people." "No one killed them," she said. "Not a person. And you can't arrest it. You can't prosecute it. You can't stop it. All you can do is make it notice you." "Mrs. Norton, it's a ye now, Lucy," she continued, her voice steady. "You probably call it a Skinwalker. My people don't like to speak the name, but you need to know what you're dealing with. It's been here for at least a year, maybe longer. It killed my grandson because he was alone on Fillmore Street at night, walking home from his friend's house. It killed the others for the same reason: opportunity, isolation, darkness. I kept my expression neutral. "Mrs. Norton, I understand you're grieving, and I know there are cultural beliefs." "This isn't belief," she interrupted. "This is fact. The elders have seen the signs. The cattle mutilation started a year ago. Then the dogs started disappearing. Then it began taking people. It moves at night. It can mimic voices. It watches from the tree line and the washes. Sheriff Martinez knows. The tribal police know. Everyone knows, but no one will tell you because they're afraid that naming it will draw its attention. If everyone knows about this threat, why hasn't anyone done anything?" I asked, trying to be respectful but firm. "What would we do?" Agnes Norton said, "Call the police. You're here. You're the police. And you can't help. Traditional ways might work. Ceremony, protection. But those take time and the right people. And it's smart. It moves around. It doesn't follow patterns like a human predator." She stood up. "I came here because you remind me of my grandson. Stubborn, convinced you can fix things with logic and procedure. But Agent Vega, this is beyond your understanding. This is old. This is from a time before your government, before your laws. Please, leave, before it marks you." "Marks me? Starts watching you specifically," she said, moving toward the door. "Learns your smell, your voice, your patterns. Once it marks you, leaving doesn't help. It'll follow you." She left. I locked the door behind her and sat on the bed, staring at nothing. I didn't believe in skinwalkers. I believed in human monsters wearing human faces, doing monstrous things because of childhood trauma, or neurological dysfunction, or pure sadistic pleasure. I believed in forensics and behavioral analysis and evidence-based investigation, but I couldn't explain the tracks, or the bite radius, or the coordinated silence of an entire town. I called my supervisor at the LA field office. "Jenkins, it's Vega. I need you to pull any unsolved animal attack cases in Riverside County over the past 2 years. Specifically, anything involving cattle mutilation or unusual predator behavior near the thermal area." "You think it's an animal now?" Jenkins asked. "I don't know what I think," I admitted. "But something's not adding up." I spent the next hour going through my notes again, trying to approach this from a different angle. If I accepted the premise that this wasn't a human perpetrator, just as a hypothetical, what would that mean for the investigation? It would mean the Bureau's entire approach was wrong. Behavioral analysis assumes human psychology. Geographic profiling assumes human movement patterns and comfort zones. Victimology assumes human motivation for target selection. If this was something else, I stopped myself. I was letting the local superstition get into my head. There was a rational explanation. There always was. My phone buzzed. Jenkins had sent over a file. I opened it and found myself looking at 2 years of incident reports from Riverside County Animal Control and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The pattern was clear once I saw it. Escalating attacks starting 18 months ago. First livestock in the desert areas around Thermal and Mecca. Then domestic animals, dogs primarily, some cats. All found partially consumed. All showing massive trauma. All in the same geographic cluster I was investigating. Then 6 months ago, the animal attacks stopped being reported because they weren't animals anymore. They were people. I was staring at the screen when I heard something outside my motel room. A scraping sound, like nails on concrete. I froze, listening. The sound moved along the wall outside, past my window. Slow, deliberate. I drew my Glock from the holster on the nightstand and moved to the window, careful to stay to the side of the curtain. The parking lot outside was lit by a single sodium vapor light that cast everything in sickly orange. I could see my rental car, an older model pickup truck 3 spaces down, and nothing else. The scraping sound stopped. I waited, my heart rate elevated but steady. Probably a stray dog or a coyote. The desert was full of wildlife. Then I heard it again, directly outside my door this time. Not scraping, sniffing. Something was sniffing at the gap under my door. I moved to the door and looked through the peephole. The parking lot light illuminated the concrete walkway outside, empty except for shadows, but I could hear breathing now, heavy and wet, right on the other side of the door. "Thermal police," I announced, using my command voice. "Identify yourself." The breathing stopped. I counted to 10, then looked through the peephole again. Nothing. I waited another 5 minutes, gun ready, then carefully opened the door with the chain still engaged and looked out. The walkway was empty, but there on the concrete, illuminated by the light from my room, was a track, a footprint, barefoot, elongated, with those same claw-tipped toe impressions I'd seen at the crime scenes. It was pressed into a patch of sand that had blown against the walkway. Fresh. The edges of the print were still sharp, undisturbed by wind. I stood there staring at it, my gun in my hand, my rational mind trying to find an explanation while something deeper and more primal was screaming at me to get back inside and lock the door. I compromised. I took 3 photographs of the print with my phone, then went back inside, locked the door, shoved the chair under the handle, and checked every window. Then I sat on the bed with my weapon in my lap and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Morning came with brutal desert heat and the sound of trucks on the highway. I looked out the window and saw that the sand patch had been disturbed by wind overnight. The print was gone, just a vague depression that could have been anything. I drove to the sheriff's station at 8 a.m. and found Martinez in his office, looking like he hadn't slept either. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. "Yeah," he said. "I figured you'd come in this morning. Something was outside my motel room last night," I said. "Left a print matching the ones at your crime scenes. I have photographs." Martinez nodded slowly. "And now you want to know what the hell is really going on. I want the truth. All of it." He sighed and poured himself coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the previous day. "The truth is complicated, Agent Vega. The truth is that some things exist outside the jurisdiction of federal law enforcement, outside the jurisdiction of any law enforcement. Martinez, if you're trying to tell me, I'm telling you that there are things in this desert that have been here longer than the United States government," he interrupted. "Things that the Kauai people have known about for centuries. Most of the time, they keep to themselves. They stay out in the deep desert, away from people. But sometimes one comes close to civilization, and when it does, people die." "You're talking about a Skinwalker," I said. His face tightened at the word. "Don't say that name out loud." "Yes, that's what the tribal elders call it. A Yi Naod Lushi, a witch, a person who performed a forbidden ritual and became something else. It's not human anymore, not really, even though it can look human. It's intelligent, it's predatory, and it's territorial. Sheriff, I need you to understand how this sounds to me." "I know exactly how it sounds," Martinez said. "I was born in Los Angeles. I went to USC. I was a deputy with the LAPD before I came back here to take care of my parents. I understand your skepticism because I had the exact same skepticism 15 years ago when I first heard the stories. But Agent Vega, I've seen things. Everyone who lives here long enough sees things. And we learn to live with it because the alternative is trying to fight something you can't fight. Everything can be fought," I said. "Everything has a weakness." "Maybe," Martinez said. "But do you want to be the one to test that theory? You're a federal agent, Vega. You're smart. You're trained. You're armed. But you're also alone in a town where no one is going to help you because they know better. If you go after this thing, it will kill you, and I'll have to write up a report saying you disappeared in the desert and was probably victim number 7. I stood there processing what he was telling me. Part of me still wanted to reject it entirely, to hold on to the rational framework that had guided my entire career. But I'd seen the print outside my door. I'd heard the breathing. I'd looked at the evidence, the tracks, the bite radius, the consumption pattern, the coordinated silence of an entire community. "What do I do?" I asked finally. "You leave," Martinez said. "You write in your report that the investigation is ongoing, but you've exhausted local leads. You recommend that the Bureau coordinate with tribal authorities, which they won't, because tribal authorities won't help them either. The case goes cold. In a few months or a year, the killings stop because the thing moves on to a different territory. That's how it works. And if it doesn't move on, how many more people die?" Martinez's expression was grim. "That's not your problem to solve. You can't solve it. The best you can do is not add yourself to the body count." I left the station and drove around Thermal for an hour, thinking. The town looked different to me now in the harsh daylight. The scattered houses, the empty lots, the distant mountains shimmering in the heat. This wasn't just a poor desert town with a crime problem. This was a community living in the shadow of something they couldn't control, making whatever accommodations they had to in order to survive. I thought about Agnes Norton's warning, about Martinez's resignation, about the tribal police officer's blunt assessment that there was nothing I could do, and I thought about my career, my training, everything I believed about justice and order and the rule of law. The professional thing to do was leave. Write the report Martinez suggested, hand it off to someone else, go back to LA and take the next case. There were serial killers I could catch, predators I could stop, victims I could get justice for. But walking away from 6 murders because the killer wasn't human, according to local folklore, that went against everything I'd sworn to do when I joined the Bureau. I decided to give it 2 more days. If I couldn't find concrete evidence of a human perpetrator in that time, I'd reassess. That afternoon, I interviewed the motel owner, a Pakistani man in his 60s named Kareem, who'd owned the Desert Wind for 20 years. I asked him about the previous night, whether he'd seen anyone or anything near room 114. "No guests checked in yesterday," he said. "Just you." "Why?" "I heard something outside my door last night, around 11 p.m. I was wondering if you saw anything on the security cameras." His expression changed, became guarded. "Cameras haven't worked in 3 years. Budget issues." "Mr. Kareem, has anyone else reported seeing or hearing things at night? Any other guests?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Agent Vega, you seem like a good man. Please check out tomorrow. Find a different place to stay, or better yet, go back to Los Angeles. The Desert Wind is not a safe place right now." "Not safe, how?" "Just not safe. I've owned this place for 20 years. I know the rhythms of this town, and right now something is off. I can feel it. My wife can feel it. We're closing the motel next week, taking a trip to visit my daughter in San Diego until things settle down." "What needs to settle down?" He shook his head. "I've said too much already. Please, just go." Everyone knew. The entire town was living with this knowledge, this awareness of something predatory in their midst, and they'd collectively decided that the best strategy was silence and avoidance. It was maddening. That evening, I drove out to the location where the most recent victim had been found, a 38-year-old woman named Lisa Sandoval who worked as a home health aide. She'd been found 4 days ago in a wash-off Fillmore Street, less than a mile from Agnes Norton's grandson's kill site. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. I parked my rental car on the shoulder and walked the scene again, looking for anything the initial investigation might have missed. The wash was a depression carved by flash floods, lined with creosote bushes and scattered rocks. The evidence flags were still in place, marking where the body had been found, where the tracks had led, where various pieces of evidence had been collected. I followed the tracks backward, away from the body dump site, to see where they originated. They led up out of the wash, across 50 yards of open desert, and terminated at a cluster of rocks near an old barbed wire fence marking the reservation boundary. The rocks would have provided cover for someone to watch the road, to wait for a target. The positioning suggested intelligence, planning, patience. I looked back toward the road and understood immediately why this location had been chosen. The wash wasn't visible from the highway. Anyone pulled over here would be completely isolated, invisible to passing traffic. It was a perfect ambush site. I photographed the rocks, the sight lines, the approaches. Then I turned to head back to my car and froze. There was someone standing by my rental car. A man, I thought, though the dying light made it hard to see clearly. Tall, wearing what looked like jeans and a jacket, facing toward me. "Hey," I called out. "I'm a federal agent. I need you to identify yourself." The figure didn't move, didn't respond. I started walking toward my car, one hand on my weapon. "Sir, I need you to identify yourself and state your business." As I got closer, I could see more details. The man was tall, very tall, maybe 6.5 feet. His proportions seemed off somehow, arms too long, posture too straight. He was wearing a cowboy hat pulled low, and a denim jacket despite the heat. "Sir, This is your final warning. Identify yourself or I will consider you a threat." The figure tilted its head. The motion was wrong, too far, like an owl turning to look at something. Then it smiled. I saw the teeth. Too many teeth. Too white in the fading light. My hand went to my Glock, but before I could draw, the figure moved. Not walked. Moved. It dropped to all fours and crossed 30 yards of desert in maybe 3 seconds, moving with a loping, animal gait that no human could replicate. I drew my weapon and fired twice. Both shots hit center mass, I'm sure of it. But the figure didn't slow. It veered off at the last second and disappeared into the wash where Lisa Sandoval had died. I stood there, weapon raised, scanning for movement. My heart was hammering. My hands were steady. Training took over, but my mind was reeling. That wasn't human. The movement, the proportions, the speed. That wasn't human. I backed toward my car, keeping my weapon trained on the wash. Nothing emerged. The desert had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just my breathing and the sound of my boots on the hard pan. I got in the car, locked the doors, and drove back to Thermal, doing about 70 on the dirt road. I didn't care about the suspension. I needed to be away from there, back in town, around lights and people and witnesses, back at the desert wind. I parked directly under the lot light and went straight to my room. I shoved the dresser in front of the door this time, checked every window, and sat on the bed with my weapon and phone. I should have called for backup, called the LA office, called someone. But who would I call? What would I say? I encountered a subject at a crime scene who moved at inhuman speed and survived 2 center mass gunshots. They'd have me evaluated for fitness for duty. I opened my laptop and started writing my report. Not the official one. That would come later. This was for me, to get my thoughts organized, to try to make sense of what I'd seen. Around midnight, I heard it again. That sniffing sound outside my door. Then scratching. Then, horribly, my own voice. "Ricardo?" it called softly, perfectly mimicking my accent, my inflection. "Ricardo, you need to come out. We need to talk about the investigation." I sat frozen on the bed, weapon raised toward the door. "Ricardo, I know you're scared," my voice continued from outside, "but you don't need to be. I just want to talk. I just want to help you understand." The scratching grew louder, more insistent. I could hear the door rattling against the dresser. "Let me in, Ricardo. Let me explain everything. Let me help you close your case." Then another voice, Agnes Norton's voice. "Agent Vega? It's Agnes Norton. Please open the door. I have information about my grandson's death." Then Martinez's voice. "Vega, it's Sheriff Martinez. Open up. We found something." It cycled through voices I'd heard over the past 4 days. The tribal police officer, the motel owner, other residents I'd interviewed, all perfectly replicated, all trying to get me to open the door. I didn't move. I barely breathed. This went on for over an hour. The voices, the scratching, the rattling door. Then, abruptly, it stopped. I heard footsteps moving away. Heavy, uneven footsteps. Then nothing. I didn't sleep. I sat on that bed with my gun until sunrise, when I heard trucks and voices and normal sounds filtering in from the highway. At 7 a.m., I packed everything I owned into my bag, checked out of the motel without explanation, and drove straight to the sheriff's station. Martinez took one look at me and said, "It came for you. Yes, but you're alive. That means it's playing with you, testing you. That's what it does when it marks someone. It tests their reactions, learns their fears. It figures out the best way to take them." "I shot it," I said. "Twice. Center mass." It didn't even slow down. Martinez nodded grimly. Yeah, bullets don't work. Neither does pepper spray or tasers or anything else in your federal toolkit. You can't fight it with procedure and training, Vega. This isn't something the FBI Academy prepared you for. Then what do? You leave. Right now. Today. You drive back to Los Angeles and you don't come back. You write whatever report you need to write, but you make sure that report doesn't involve anyone else coming out here to continue your investigation. Because if you send more agents, it'll just mark them too. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair in Martinez's office and tried to think. My hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline and lack of sleep. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay, to solve this, to get justice for 6 dead people who deserved better than being written off as victims of local superstition. But I'd seen it. I'd heard it. I'd shot it and watched it keep coming. How do I write this up? I asked finally. Martinez leaned back in his chair. You tell the truth. Most of it. 6 victims showing signs of predatory animal attack, wounds consistent with a large carnivore, possibly a mountain lion or bear, though the behavior is atypical. Local population is uncooperative due to historical tensions between tribal communities and federal authorities. Investigation hampered by lack of witnesses and physical evidence linking scenes. Recommend case remain open but downgrade to cold case status pending new evidence. Coordinate future investigations with tribal police who have better community relationships. That's a non-answer, I said. That's the only answer you're going to get. Martinez replied. Look, I know this goes against everything you believe in. I know you want justice. But sometimes the job is about knowing what battles you can win and what battles will just get you killed. This is the latter. I drove out of Thermal that afternoon. It was October 1st, 2023. The temperature was 98 degrees and the desert stretched out on both sides of Highway 111 like something vast and indifferent to human concerns. I watched the town shrink in my rearview mirror, the scattered buildings, the reservation land, the mountains in the distance. Somewhere out there, something was watching. Something that had killed 6 people and would probably kill more. Something that the law couldn't touch because the law was built on the assumption that criminals were human. I wrote my report exactly as Martinez had suggested. It was filed, reviewed, and the case was downgraded to cold status pending new evidence. No additional bureau resources were allocated. The Thermal investigation was, officially, at a dead end. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Sheriff Martinez. Thought you'd want to know, he said. There was another incident last night. Cattle mutilations on a ranch about 15 miles north of Thermal. Same signature. Partial consumption. Massive trauma. Those tracks. It's moving, I said. Yeah. North. Looks like. Away from town. The elders think it's following the livestock migration patterns now that people are being more careful about going out alone at night. Give it another month or 2 and it'll probably move out of the area entirely, until it finds another town. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. Until it finds another town. I think about Thermal sometimes. About Agnes, Norton, and Sheriff Martinez and all those people living with the knowledge that something predatory shares their desert, something that their ancestors knew about and learned to coexist with through caution and respect and silence. About how our modern world, with all its technology and law enforcement and scientific certainty, has no framework for dealing with things that shouldn't exist. I think about the tracks outside my motel room. The breathing in the darkness, my own voice calling to me from the other side of the door. The FBI taught me to profile serial killers, to understand the psychology of human predators, to build cases based on evidence and precedent. They taught me that with enough training and resources, we could catch anyone. They were wrong. Some things can't be caught. Some things can only be survived. I'm still with the BAU, still working cases. Still getting justice for victims when I can, But now I know that there are limits to what law enforcement can do, boundaries we weren't trained to recognize. There are cases that can't be solved with forensics and behavioral analysis. There are predators that don't fit into our taxonomies of human evil. And sometimes the best thing you can do, the only thing you can do, is listen when the locals tell you to leave, because they're not protecting a suspect or obstructing justice. They're protecting you from something that's been in those mountains and deserts and forests since before we built our cities and our laws and our certainties about how the world works. If you're ever working a case and the entire community gives you the same warning, if the tracks don't make sense and the wounds don't match any known predator, if people who should be demanding justice are instead telling you to go and listen to them, they know something you don't, something important. The government doesn't know everything. The FBI doesn't have protocols for everything. And sometimes the best way to serve and protect is to know when you're out of your depth. I learned that in Thermal, California, in the fall of 2023. I hope you never have to learn it yourself. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story. If experiences like this interest you, if you want to hear more accounts of things that don't fit into our normal understanding of the world, consider subscribing to this channel. Leave a comment if you've ever encountered something that made you question what you thought you knew about reality. And if you're in law enforcement or search and rescue, be careful out there. Not everything that hunts in the darkness is human. Stay safe.